Today's episode is a continuation of last month's Multiverse Tales What If Community Redraw. And just for an additional bit of context, this conversation from this episode and the previous one is taking place prior to the Summoner's Beast storyline occurring. But anyway, let's get right into it, shall we? Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
And we're back. Sorry for that brief little lapse, Record Keeper. Archibald had to go home to be in the door of a little pathological liar somewhere else, so we're subbing in Professor Oak here.
That is Professor Dresden Oakland. I am not a children's video game character. Hello, Record Keeper. It has been a while.
For you, perhaps, but as I have stated to Benny and Dr. McGreggor, I do not perceive time the same way as three-dimensional beings, nor does it pass as you'd assume here in the Akashic Records. Though, I must say, your energetic field is far more pleasant now than it was the last time you visited. Not as joyful as Benny here, perhaps, but leagues beyond what it once was. I am very happy for you.
I appreciate that, and can attest to the fact that I am far better off now than the last time I came here. Though, I feel it only fair to state that I am still quite skeptical of many of the claims you make about reality, and this place holding all potential information from across time, space, and realities.
That is perfectly understandable, and I would expect no less from a very analytical mind such as your own. Wait, you've been here before, Dresden?
Yes, though quite some time ago. An overseer who'd been locked in Baxel's prison had successfully visited the records once, and I overheard him discussing how to reach them. Of course, he was unable to do so again while trapped in my prison, but I came myself seeking potential ways to, speed up the process of ridding the multiverse of its overseers, as was my goal at the time.
Right, you wanted to do a faster and more efficient genocide than the one you ended up doing. Sorry, scratch that, never mind, forget I said nothing. Yeah, Benny and I decided we're gonna try and cut back on the genocide jokes. Now that you're building the Redemption Arc Support Foundation, we figure you're on the up and up enough that we can stop laying into you so much about, the genocide you done did.
Well, I appreciate that. Anyhow, as you'd expect, the Record Keeper was not inclined to allow me to go poking around for information on how to eviscerate a specific population of the multiverse, regardless of how prone to causing problems they may have been.
Whether you wanted to harm or help them, it was not within my right to give you such information.
Of course, because of the incredibly arbitrary rules you claim to have in place, which seem to be altered as you see fit during conversation.
Okay, yeah, definitely sounds like you've been here before, Dreszy. Anyway, we ain't here to argue with the Record Keeper, we're here— wait a minute. Just out of curiosity, since the Record Keeper and the records look different to everyone, what do they look like to you?
Well, the records themselves appear to be a dimly lit library with silver-polished shelves holding many books, folders, and boxes of case files, much like the sites available at my long former place of work, the SCP Foundation. The Keeper appears to be a 10 or so foot tall male in a well-pressed dark green suit, with ivory white hands and head, also lacking any features such as hair, eyes, mouth, and so on.
Jeez, that sounds terrifying, like you're in a dark basement with the blatant Slender Man.
Actually, I find his appearance and this place oddly calming. I could see myself enjoying reading in a space such as this.
Either way, I'm glad I see an angel lady in a bright, pretty library. But I guess from, your whole vibe, it makes sense you'd be seeing something kind of creepy. Like, how when you was a kid you thought the musical Cats was both terrifying and entertaining at the same time?
If you are still attempting to suggest once again that I was singing along as we all endured that ridiculous Cats film adaptation, then you are—
You can't hide this one on us, bud. Last time we was here, the Record Keeper told us that you was a fan of Cats as a kid back in your universe.
Excuse me? Why was that information you would willingly divulge to these individuals?
Well, I could attempt to explain, but it is as you said, from your level of consciousness, my rules will likely seem quite arbitrary. Yeah, translation, she just felt like it. But anyway, I'm gonna actually try and keep us on track here. I was thinking, since we're here looking at different versions of our friends that could pop up in the multiverse at some point, and since you said every possibility exists, is there a possible timeline or variant of our pal Unkillable Kate, as folks call her, where she actually gets superpowers? Look, she's gotten power-ups here and there, but generally speaking she fights without any superpowers, and still manages to be one of the toughest folks we know. Honestly, she still kinda scares me a bit, even though she's chilled out since she started dating the teen guidance counselor.
I too would be quite curious to learn about a highly empowered version of Caitlin. She is a lethal force as it is, without any abilities.
Well, there is a very intriguing future timeline I could tell you of, but I will have to be quite vague on certain details that you may be curious about. This tale would play out in a world where the deities of various mythologies were in fact real, though it is not M308, the dimension that the Archon demons are competing over the possession of.
Come again with that last bit?
Apologies, you have not yet learned that information, wiping it from your memories and continuing on. Anyhow, in this dimension, these gods fell into a slumber for many generations, then reawakened and went to war with one another, eventually causing an apocalyptic collapse of the modern world. In it, a young woman is born by the name of Caitlin Obscurum. In her home country of Iceland, a twisted cult had formed that claimed to be doing the bidding of this world's iteration of the Norse god of war, Tyr. They created fighting pits where they forced any poor beings they captured to fight to the death against other humans and monsters alike. Caitlin's parents were killed and she was taken by this cult as a child and forced into this arena. They assumed she'd be fodder for the more powerful fighters, but it turned out Kate had an ability that had lain dormant until she was put in lethal danger in the arena. A power awakened within her that, with enough training, could potentially even make her a threat to the likes of the Reaper, giving her powers similar to that very being.
Wait, is this part something that already exists? Like, does folks with those kind of powers exist somewhere in the multiverse now? Because we could really use somebody like that on our side against the Archon demons if they do exist.
Given that information would be incredibly useful to us, I imagine the record keeper will not willingly give us a clear answer on the matter. Correct? Precisely. Those are indeed the details I was referring to my need to be vague of. Very specific circumstances would have to occur for the overseer of this world to learn of and make a copy of these abilities, and I cannot say whether or not they exist now, or are merely a potential in the near future.
Well, I'm just gonna take it on face value that that is a thing that exists now then, and we should be on the lookout for folks with that kind of power. But the fact that the record keeper is telling us that and ain't erasing it from us could be proof that it's a super unlikely thing that we've got basically no chance of finding.
Or the keeper is simply telling us this knowing that we will speculate endlessly to a point where we lose all sense of value from the information.
Well, whatever it is, I'm invested. So tell us more about this super sort of Reaper Kate.
Over her first decade in the arena, Kate's powers grow and grow, with her able to make smoking weaponry, move at godly speeds, and fight with the ferocity and strength of a god of war. Eventually, she becomes powerful enough that they can't even keep her caged, and she breaks free, stealing the massive blade of the cult's leader and slaughtering everyone she knows to be in their ranks. Unsated by this tirade, however, she then seeks out the god Tyr that they claimed to be working in service of. Tyr claims to have never approved of this cult's actions, but Kate still holds him responsible for their crimes, for not putting a stop to them.
Yeah, that kinda sounds fair enough. I mean, if he really didn't approve, he could have solved that with one phone call, right? Like, hey, glad you folks is fans and all, but stop with the murder pits and just make me a statue or a cake or something.
This version of Kate slays her realm's iteration of the Norse god of war and gets a sense of accomplishment she'd never felt before from doing so. She then seeks out the rest of the surviving Norse pantheon and finds that the incredibly rare abilities she was born with grant her the strength to slay even the mightiest deities of her realm. She starts being seen as a deity herself, though one of terrifying death. Some praise her for slaughtering the gods and some fear her, but either way her tirade goes on and on. Anger overwhelms her for much of her early life,
until she meets a group of demigods that convince her to work alongside them. They too have hunted gods, but are far less bloodthirsty than this God Reaper Kate. With enough time spent around these demigods, Kate's fury begins to subside, and she realizes that beneath her rage was a still scared little girl taken from her parents and trying to feel safe by whatever means necessary, even if that meant going on a killing spree across the planet. She slowed her rampage and worked more methodically with this group to learn what deities did indeed need to be hunted and stopped, and which ones could be left to live, as they seemed to be doing more good for the world than bad.
So even with crazy superpowers, Kate's story ain't really that different. Yeah, except this version of Kate murdered her world's equivalent to Dresden, I guess. Seeing as how she killed the person that put her in the fighting arenas.
To be fair, I did not put Caitlin in the fighting arena within Baxel's prison. I simply put her into the prison itself. Not that I am inclined to defend my actions towards her. I am grateful to hear that this Caitlin was also able to find some semblance of peace with new allies.
Yeah, that's all well and good and cool and stuff, but now I want to go at something weirder. Last time you wanted something weird, we got that creepy looking Kayla and Charlie swap. You really want to go this way again? What? That story was real sweet in the end, and still pretty cool looking. But fine, I want weird, but not in a freaky weird kind of way. What about Astra as like a mermaid? What are you playing Mad Libs in your head? Where the heck did Mermaid Astra come from? I don't know, I mean we're in the Akashic Records, so maybe the idea came from here. Maybe this already exists, right?
Benny is actually correct. There is indeed a being with a similar life history and appearance to your own ally Astra that is also a merfolk.
Boom! How do you like me now? It's like my mom always says, when you listen to your heart, you eat a la carte. Wait, what? I get that your mum has some weird science, but what the flip does that one mean? My ma's convinced that since it's French and fancy sounding, a la carte just means eating real well. Folks has tried to correct her on it before, but like she always says, if you think she ain't right, prepare for a fight. So yeah, now to our whole family, a la carte just means eating real fancy and real good. Yeah, alright, well, that does sound pretty on brand for your mother. Anyway, let's get on with this Mermaid Astra. What's she like?
Well, the tale of Princess Astriel is one that...
I'm sorry. Astriel? Like Ariel from The Little Mermaid, but Astra?
Yes, in a sense that is correct.
Alright, I guess no further questions. Go on.
Revolves around her relationship with her cruel Siren Queen mother, Tarsila.
Right, Tarsila, of course. But is this gonna be triggering or something for you, Dresden? Should we maybe not do a story with a version of Tarsa, the lady that destroyed your life way back when?
I appreciate the concern, Doctor, but it is fine. Tarsa is locked away and has been stripped of all her abilities. Her living her life out in isolation may not strike me as severe enough punishment for all the torment she has brought to myself or the universes she has overseen, but in the least she can never do harm to anyone else again.
Wait. I know you can't see no facial features on the record keeper, Dresden, but to me she's making a real sad and pitying sort of face all of a sudden. What's that about?
Oh, nothing at all. It is true that at the time in 3D reality when you are all partaking in this conversation, Tarsa is indeed still locked up in the pocket dimension of A016.
Why would you phrase it like that unless
wiping that from your memories. Why do I suddenly feel very distressed? The tale I am telling involves a variation of Tarsa, and it brought up some painful memories for you. Oh, that makes sense, I suppose. You may continue, though I feel as though I am missing something important. Siren Queen of the Seven Seas is an incredibly powerful role in this world, and it was held for many decades by Astriel's mother, Tarsila. She acquired it by force using her own inherent magical abilities, amplified greatly by an artifact called the Heart of the Sea.
I smell a multiversal orb equivalent.
Yes, in the context of this story, it plays a similar role to how Tarsa has, in the past, used the multiversal orb, though this artifact is far less powerful. Still, it was enough to help her claim the role as Siren Queen. Some challenged her in a competition for the throne called a Siren Brace Challenge, but with the aid of the heart, she was always able to defeat her foes. She eventually had a child while on the throne and attempted to teach her daughter, Astriel, that to be a good leader you needed to hold power and control over all those beneath you. Astriel knew in her heart this was not the right way to lead, but always feared that if she challenged her mother's teachings, Astriel would be disowned and banished to the trench.
What? Now we got Aquaman stuff in here and Little Mermaid stuff? Just kinda throwing all the pop culture mermaid things in, huh? We're gonna have Ponyo showing up in this at some point too? Maybe even Jack Sparrow randomly swinging in?
On top of being frightened of banishment, Astriel was also quite afraid of her mother's power. Not only did she rule the armies of the Seven Seas and have her own magic, but the heart of the sea granted her the ability to fire devastating beams and sonic blasts that could range from small and ear-piercing all the way up to destructive enough to vibrate a person's body to pieces in a single blow. Astriel intended to just stay quiet until she could inherit the throne from her mother, then start trying to rule as a more compassionate leader. She tried to avoid her mother as much as possible, and even started spending time on land, having two close human friends, a blacksmith named Sterling Edgar, and a miner named Alexis Jonas.
Oh, let me guess, did this Astra appear as a human and pretend to be human and trick this Sterling into dating her or something?
No, she was completely honest with them, and even confided in these two about her concerns with her mother.
Perhaps our own Astra could learn a thing or two from this one. I mean, Astra's not one of the people I know the best in this group, but she seems like she's gotten more mature than she used to be. Ain't that irresponsible anymore, right? Yeah, of course she's more responsible. She wouldn't do something like, hit on an Archon demon or something like that. At least at the time of recording, she hasn't. Oh, say again? I'm just babbling. Go on, Keeper.
Unfortunately, long before it would come time for Astriel to take over from her mother, Tarsala's lust for power grew too far. She was no longer satisfied with the seas. She wanted to take control of the land as well, so the entire world would be hers to rule. Astriel finally attempted to stand up to her mother and talk her off of this violent path, but Tarsala would hear none of it, claiming that Astriel's new land-dwelling friends were tainting her mind, and this assault was even more necessary than Tarsala had first thought. Astriel knew the only way now she could stop her mother was to challenge her to the Siren Brace Challenge, but she needed a weapon close to on par with the Heart of the Sea. She gathered some of the most powerful supplies she could get her hands on and brought them to Sterling. Being a blacksmith, she asked if he could forge a weapon from the hide of a Brazilian leviathan and from iron from the beings of the trench. These materials together could produce an indestructible weapon, and Astriel could imbue it with some limited magic she'd inherited from her mother. That combination could make a useful enough weapon to defeat Tarsala in combat. Astriel publicly challenged her mother, who was outraged and quickly proved willing to slay her own daughter for this treason.
Unsurprising that variations of Tarsa are just as ruthless as the one I'm all too aware of.
Tarsala's beams and sonic blasts were incredibly powerful, and Astriel would only be able to evade them for so long in this fight. Unless she rid her mother of her eyesight. Astriel used the magic she'd imbued into her trident to create a thick haze in the water that Tarsala could not see through. She fired blindly but was unable to hit her daughter. Thankfully, the sound from Tarsala's blasts made it very easy for Astriel to locate her own target. Astriel was able to sneak up on Tarsala through the fog and strike her with a barrage of non-lethal but very damaging blows. They were enough to weaken Tarsala so Astriel could steal the Heart of the Sea and destroy it with her trident, determined for nobody to have its immense power. Astriel then banished her mother to the trench and took the throne for herself, calling off all attacks on the surface world and swearing to be a ruler who listened to and respected her people.
I reiterate, our Astra may be more mature than she once was, but this one does sound significantly more responsible and heroic than our own. Sure, but what fun would our team be if we ditched all the folks with flaws, right? We wouldn't even have a team no more. I suppose, but fun is not a relevant factor to a team's effectiveness at getting a job done. Hey, it's like my ma always says, get in the way of my fun and you can choke on my gun. Well, but what? Alright, I get that your mum is scary sometimes, but I don't buy that she's ever said that one. Wow, yeah, you know what? You're right, that's weird. She ain't never said that before, but I also got this memory popping up like my ma has somehow said that, but I don't really get how that works.
Well, your mother has said that, but not your current mother, Benny.
Come again?
Nothing, do not concern yourself with what I said. What other variants would you like to explore next?
Alright, well, if we're going weird, then I want to go real weird. We got Dresden here. Ain't seen no variants of him yet, so, I'm wondering, is there, a real Jellicle version of Dresden out there in the multiverse?
That is indeed a ridiculous suggestion, beyond anything even Benny would come up with.
Jellicle? Am I missing something here? What's that? It's one of them random nonsense words they say a whole bunch in Dressy's favorite musical, Cats. Oh yeah!
No variation of me has ever been or ever will be a humanoid cat monstrosity such as those within the T.S. Eliot adapted... Are you both seeing this as well?
It's coming into view right now and I'm loving it already. Talk us through what we're seeing here, Record Keeper.
Well, in a certain potential future, there is a dimension in which cats are still common house pets, but also walk on hind legs and have human-like proportions, though with tails and larger feline ears. Cats have their own secret lives that occur when humans do not have their eyes on the creatures, and they communicate through poetic song and dance.
There are few moments in my life I've loved more than this one right here.
Would you be quiet? You requested to hear and see this tale, so let us do so.
The particular community of cats we observe is led by an elder called Old Deuteronomy, but in another high-ranking and important role is one called Dreary Den, the warden cat. He is in charge of keeping the peace, and when certain cats step too far out of line, he takes them to a pound and locks them away so they cannot cause trouble.
Not that I believe that this has occurred or ever will occur, but was this warden cat able to keep the devious Macavity from kidnapping Old Deuteronomy in this reality, as occurred in the show?
Yes, he indeed was, as well as often keeping Mungo Jerry and Rumple Teaser from causing trouble.
Excellent. Good. That is good to hear, even if this is clearly a fictitious tale.
He seems even more into this than we are. Hey, given this is a weird cat musical world, does that mean they got a song for this dreary cat guy?
Dreary Den was his name. Not that I care or remember that.
Yes, of course, I can attempt to recite the song for you now. Now listen up, all you misfits, all scoundrels and miscreants, all ruffians and delinquents, your tricky games and your dissent will not get past the warden cat. No chance to vandalize this place, no chance to rip the silk and lace, no chance to tip the flower vase when Dreary Den's on your case. He can't be tricked, he's far too bright, with wits as sharp as his eyesight. He'll catch you in the dead of night with the shining beam of his flashlight. He'll lecture and he'll reprimand, but no, he won't get out of hand in upholding his sworn duty to keep the peace and harmony. Just doing my job, that is that, says Dreary Den the warden cat.
Well, the tune is not as refined as some of the others in the stage production, but if you by chance have the lyrics written down, perhaps I could log them away in my personal files for later reference.
You seem like you're feeling pretty jellicle about that song, Dresy boy. Even though this cat version of you looks like he's the least jellicle cat in the show.
I beg to differ. He is clearly just as jellicle as the others, if not more so. He is simply taking his work seriously.
Wait, you actually know what Jellicle means? I thought it was just a random nonsense word, like half the other stuff in that show. Yeah, I'll bet even T.S. Eliot doesn't know what Jellicle means. Condescend the production all you wish. It will not change the fact that prior to My World's demise, it had earned over $3.5 billion in ticket sales on Broadway, and has gone well beyond that in other universes. Alright, we're just gonna let you enjoy this one. You go ahead and get your Jellicle on, pal. You are still using the term wrong, but thank you.
And there we have the rest of last month's community redraw. Huge thank you again to everyone who submitted, and specifically to the 3 people chosen for this episode. Nick's Adventure 528 on YouTube, Alden Throckmorton, and Olivia Nealer. If you enjoyed this and you haven't seen the Panini-verse episode, which was the first episode where we were having conversations in the Akashic Records and seeing Multiverse Tales variants, you might want to go back to that episode, or if you want to be caught up on what's happening in Multiverse Tales right now, I'd recommend starting at the beginning of the Summoner's Beasts, because all the biggest plot developments in Multiverse Tales have been happening in that series currently. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I read from a man named Dan Go, who said, "Use exercise as a celebration of what your body can do, not as punishment for what you ate." I've been thinking more lately about how reframing the things you do in life can be really helpful and encouraging to you, and then I read that and I was like, yeah, that's a really good way to think about the exercise you're getting. Especially if you find a fun way to get exercise like I've done in the last 6 months or so, where I've started doing trampolining. It's been a lot more fun than going to the gym all the time, and every time I go, it does feel like I'm celebrating what my body can do and what new things I'm learning. I hope that's inspiring in some way. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday, where we're getting a big action-heavy episode of Mythol Lethal. I'll see you there. Goodbye.